everyone, and welcome to today's AESIN Tech Talk. My name's Chris. I'm standing in for Gunny for this edition. Today's special guest is Alan Gentle. He is director and co-founder of VESOS Solutions Limited. Alan has worked on transport and control system projects since 1993 in a variety of roles across management, analysis, development, and operations. He's managed, designed, and delivered complex operational traffic management solutions. With VESOS, he has led the development of eCall, data-led incident detection concepts, and worked on the development of a business case for the adoption of data-led eCall in national highways. He is also a contributory author of the SHADAR Stopped Vehicle Detection research paper for the European Union. Alan, the floor is yours.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Christopher, Angela, and Goni as well. Thank you very much for the invitation, everybody. Thank you for your time. As Christopher was saying, my name is Alan Gentle, and it's very weird having your CV read back to you. It's an unusual thing, but there we go. So the talk today is about eCall today. And as Christopher was saying, I'm actually from VESOS. We'll talk a little bit about VESOS, but we're here under the auspices of the Transport Technology Forum. So thank you to them for asking us to do this. So just a heads up on what we're going to cover. We're going to do about 20 minutes, and then we'll just open the floor for questions. Any questions I can't answer because I'm too dumb and I have to go and ask my colleagues, or we don't have time for, Christopher will make a note and then we'll get back to you with the responses. Okay, so we'll have a quick chat about Transport Technology Forum and VESOS, because you probably may not have heard of VESOS, so just explain where we are, who we are. We'll just do a recap on eCall 101, because I'm sure you all know what eCall is, and if you don't, we'll just make sure you do. The main focus is really to look at how eCall is doing today. So what's the penetration in the fleet? How many eCalls are actually being made? And also to look at how it's being used. So all of you folks do great jobs installing this in cars, designing them, making those buttons available. But what we're really interested in is what happens when somebody presses that button. And we've been doing a lot of work in this area to find out what is going on and some of the shortfalls and some of the improvements that we can make. So what we will be doing is looking at how eCall should be used today, in particular around the data elements of it. We'll talk about some opportunities and barriers. So when you talk to people about eCall, they tend to come up with the same worries and concerns, which we'll discuss in brief. And if we have time, we'll just quickly look at the future of eCall as well. Okay, so just a quick heads up, by the way, eCall today is the name of this presentation. Not as first advertised. We had a bit of a laugh when it was first advertised as pCall today. Just to be clear, this is pCall and this is eCall. And just in case anyone's here for prostate recommendations, I am not actually a urologist, so apologies for that. It's just eCall I'm going to cover off. Okay, Transport Technology Forum. I'm sure most of you are familiar, if not all of you, familiar with Transport Technology Forum, but as I say, we're here under the auspices of them. And obviously they're there to improve road transport through technology, co-funded by Department for Transport and Innovate UK. And I believe there's recently a memorandum of understanding with AESIN. And we are here because we have been working with the Transport Technology Forum on eCall. And just a shout out to George Brown from KL Systems, who I know is on the call. We've been doing some great work with George, working with Transport Technology Forum to see what is actually capable, what can be done with eCall data and systems further down the line, such as George's system. Quick heads up on VESOS. We're 4 old blokes with various male boarding pattern issues. We started up a company about a year ago, but we've been working together on eCall for about 4 years. Together, we've got a lot of years of experience. Andy Rook, we call him the godfather of eCall. He's been involved right from the very start of eCall in terms of its definition of standards within the European Union. Danny Woolard has been heavily involved in the automotive industry. Andy Graham, I'm sure you all know, is a connected vehicles expert, and there's myself as well. And without going through the CV, my background is really about trying to use this to improve operational responses on the road. Done a lot of work with national highways, operator training, operator processes, and I can just see the real value of eCall to operators. But it's just not being used at the moment, in my opinion. Okay, so what do we do? Yeah, advice, research, deployment. But in particular, we're also working on a data solution, something we call TCall, and we're not here to sell VESOS, but think about the actual data and what we can do with that. That's really what we're interested in. Okay, so let's start off with the eCall 101. It's that red SOS button. There, that's my mate's BMW. Sometimes it's under a guard, sometimes it's not. In this case, that's John's grubby finger there. He's pressed the SOS button, it's opened up with the guard, and inside is the actual button itself. So they come in various shapes and sizes. Sometimes they're at the top console by the rear view mirror. Sometimes they're down by the gear stick. This one is a particular test device that we've got. I took this morning, so you can see it comes in different shapes and flavors, but usually has SOS and a telephone on it to indicate. Okay, what happens when you actually press this button? Now, that button gets activated in two ways. One is through somebody actually pressing it. And most of the time, it's activated because somebody's actually pressed the button. But it's also clever enough to detect if the airbag or if a collision sensor has gone off. And in that case, it automatically triggers the eCall. So if you go missing the central reservation or you have an accident, the airbag goes off. And we talked to people about this and they said, yeah, I had an accident. They said the first thing I heard was somebody talking to me because the eCall has a telephone built into it. It's got a SIM, a microphone and a speaker. That opens up a telephone call via the cellular network through to what's called a public service answering point, or PSAP. And that's basically your 999 call. So when eCall goes off, it calls 999 for you. You get a voice call opened up. They can also call you back if needs be, and they will speak with you. But the key thing is that eCall sends a small SMS piece of data called the minimum set of data, or MSD. That data gets sent with the voice and arrives at the PSAP, the 999 as well. Okay, so in short, that's kind of what eCall does. And we talked about this minimum set of data. What's in this little SMS? Well, there's some really important stuff in here. The control information, the third line there. Is it manual or automatic activation? So has somebody pressed it or has the airbag gone off? Is it a test call or is it an emergency? Well, on the road, it's all going to be emergency calls. Can the location be trusted? In other words, can it see enough satellites to actually give a good GPS position? VIN number. So if it's been fitted by the manufacturer, the VIN number of the vehicle will be in the SMS, uniquely identifying that vehicle. It also identifies what's the propulsion type. So is it electric? Obviously, that has a big effect on recovery and fire responses. If it's dangerous, such as LPG or compressed natural gas, that can be flagged up as well. But it also has the vehicle location as well as the last two locations and the direction. So this little piece of data says this vehicle at this location at this time. So that's what eCall does, but actually how is it being used today? So I'm just going to run through a little animation to show the process of what happens from that call. Sorry, actually, no, I'm just going to give you some stats first of all. Apologies for that. Okay, so it's in all new vehicles approved since 2018. So if anybody brings out a new model of vehicle, European standards say it must be fitted with eCall. So at the moment, nearly 1 in 3 vehicles, cars and vans on the road have eCall. And if you actually look at the vehicles on the national highways network, so motorways, major trunk roads, that proportion is higher because obviously fleet drivers tend to use the motorway network a lot more than, say, rural roads. So it's nearly 1 in 3 at the moment, probably more. And that number is growing every year. So about a year ago, we were seeing about 50% growth year on year. And it has slowed down a little since then. We've got a little graph just to show you that. So that means in 2022, we had 57,000 eCalls going off in the UK. That's a heck of a lot of eCalls going off. and that's growing all the time. Now remember, there's either automatic airbag going off or there's manual push the SOS. So out of those calls, about 1 in 20 are automatic. And that's working out to be between about 30 to 40 per hour. So it's basically one automatic activation in the UK every 2 minutes. So we have the 999 voice call, and we also have this eCall data message. And just some stats just to back up what we were talking about here. These are stats going back all the way to March 19. These are eCalls that have been received by the 999 BT call handling service. The blue line shows the actual calls received. The orange line shows the calls that were connected through to the 999 services, such as police, ambulance, or fire. The proportions there, probably about a third of all calls are actually passed through. And if you look here around about May 20, you will see there is actually a dip. That's because COVID hit and we all had to stay at home. And then later this year, you can see we've got a large increase and then a drop back. We wait to see what's actually happening about that and the reasons for that drop. But you can see that over time, there's a very significant increase in calls. Okay, so on to this little animation that I mentioned earlier. So when eCall is pressed, two things are going to happen. It's either going to call 999 or it's going to call your vehicle service center. So we'll look at the 999 process. And if you've got a Ford or a Kia, Hyundai, Dacia, whatever, you're probably going to go through to 999 directly, and 2/3 of all calls do. So eCall activates. It makes a call to 999 112 if you're in Europe. They will then say, what service do you want? And most people will say police. If you've had an accident, you probably want to speak to the police. Now, that could, of course, be fire or AMBO if that's what you ask for. So 999 will pass the voice call through to the police. Now, as I mentioned before, there's a piece of data that gets sent to 999 as well. That data contains vehicle identification number, last 3 locations, fuel types, and so on. And what happens is that data goes into something called the ESEC database. It's a database that 999 hold, and the data sits there. And if the police are aware that there is data, i.e. they know it's an eCall, and their system has the capability of going and getting that data, they can access it. So it's only if they know it's an eCall and they have the ability to get all the data. Even then, they can't get all of the data. So they only get the last location rather than the last 3 locations, for example. So they can get the data, but it's limited. Now, from that point on, the police can then obviously send their responses to the incident. They can call, or if they have an interface, they can send the log through to national highways to warn drivers with signs and signals and to manage and clear the incident. The police can also contact fire and AMBO. Now, of course, the order of these depends on the operator and their decision processes here. But the point is that we've got various legs in the chain, which means that actually, from the point of pressing that button all the way through to national highways, fire, AMBO, organising those things, typically it's taking at least 10 minutes for that information to get through to these people. And that's the thing that just drives me to distraction, because I drive on the M3 every day. It's a smart motorway, and I've seen vehicles break down. And if they press that eCall button or it goes off automatically, it can take about 10 minutes for national highways to find out if the radar doesn't activate or if they're not notified in another way. Now, smart motorways are pretty well instrumented, but you put this onto an A road or any other road that doesn't have that sort of level of instrumentation, and you've got a long delay. And that's the thing that really does my nut in, because that's something which we can obviously improve. So that's the 999 journey. If we look at our other option, is something called third-party service. So eCall does allow for your eCall to be transferred through to a third-party service. So this is typically through to your vehicle manufacturer call center. So if my mate John pressed his BMW button, he'd actually talk to BMW. These are called telematic calls, and about a third of all of these eCalls are telematics. And it tends to be the higher range of vehicles, so BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagens. Sometimes it depends on the model or whether you've actually bought the subscription to it. Now, if you have paid all the money for that lovely subscription, When it comes to a 999 call, you get a worse service. The reason for that is because it gets answered by the call center. And if they say it's an emergency, they will then transfer the call to 999. So you've got an extra leg in this journey. Now 999 will then do their thing as they did before. That data, the MSD, gets sent to the vehicle call center. And although we don't know about every single call center, the information we're getting is that that call data is verbally read out over the phone. So you get somebody saying the latitude is 56.478, da da da. And it's hard to understand that we are still dealing with this at this stage. So when you've got TPS, you've got an even longer journey. So this is the state of play of what happens when the button is pressed in eCall today. So if we think about how should eCall really be used, well, there's two ways we're looking at this at the moment. We are talking with various parties about trying to improve this whole process. The first thing to do is to make sure that whoever answers the phone from 999, whether it's police, ambo, fire, they are aware of what eCall is. And if an eCall comes in and it's an automatic activation, it means that somebody has been in a significant incident. The airbag's gone off, collision detectors have gone off. So, for example, we've looked at the National Fire Rescue Service call handling scripts, and there's no specific mention of eCall. So it's something which we're working with them so that operators are aware of it, understand what it means, and can react appropriately. So there's a lot of sort of working and improving awareness for the existing flow. But really, what we really ought to be doing is as soon as that 999 takes the data, we should be pushing that out to all interested responders. And this is where this T-call solution that we keep banging on about comes in. Because if you take data and you send it out without waiting for phone calls, you can get it to people. You know how computers can interface. We can do it within 30 seconds, likely within 10 seconds. So then it means you can alert national highways and so on within a few seconds rather than a few minutes of the incident actually occurring. So the opportunities of this is about using equal data for incident detection and response. So it's about the speed of data and not using the speed of voice. So 10 times faster incident detection, which means 10 times faster incident response, because as soon as people know about it earlier, they can get response in place. Now I'm going to just cut through a little bit because time is running down. There's also opportunities if you fuse this, if you fuse this with other data such as radar, Waze, or on-road loops, you can start to build up a much better picture. And eCall also complements on-road technology. So if you think about radar systems detect incidents for all vehicles, but only on the roads where it's installed. eCall is only on some vehicles, but it covers all roads. So there are nice synergies there. There are great benefits to using the data for emergency responders and traffic management. And bear in mind, there's the golden hour for accident savings to reduce the impact of accidents, and there is the platinum 20 minutes. So if we can reduce the time to notify people from 10 minutes to 1 minute, that's a much better outcome for everybody. I'm just going to skip on from this one because time is going on. You will have a copy of this presentation later to look at as well. Okay, it's worth just mentioning some of the barriers that people throw up. So we get false alarms, as in, Mum, what happens if I press this? If you ever ask anybody, have you ever pressed it, you'll find that they just tried it out to see what happens. Well, there's a lot of false alarms. But if you do some intelligence around that, like an automatic eCall, that's really an accident. That's 100%. If it's one manual eCall, probably it's a false alarm. But if you've got two or more, highly likely. Education, we can improve the education, such as telling drivers what eCall is, when to use it. And a nod to National Highways here for doing a lot of good work in this area. Data protection, people throw up worries and say, well, hang on, it's an invasion of privacy, it's tracking people. No, the EU legislation allows for the use of this data for emergency purposes. And also, is it really personal data? There's only the VIN number can really track the vehicle back to an individual, and that's only indirectly. So it's a very marginal thing. There's lots of research to say this is not an issue, and there is no privacy concern here. And the last point to notice is 2G or 3G switch off. There's talk about 2G being switched off in 10 years, but Best case, it's not going to. Analog was never turned off. And the worst case is, well, we've got 10 years to save lives. And by that time, there'll be an eCall too. So let me just move on. I will just mention as well the VESOS air freshener. This was a little educational piece. We give out air fresheners that says press the button, save a life, just as a way of trying to remind people to use eCall. I will skip on from this point. I think I'll finish it now and then just open this up for questions. But just to let you know, there are some points about the future of eCall and where it's going to go from here. And I'll skip on from
Thank you very much, Alan.
And I'll hand over to you, Christopher. Thank you.
Onto the Q&A section. I think a question from John refers to, this was asked when you had your first slide up. John was asking if it applied to all vehicles, cars, for example. This is in relation to your first slide.
Is this in relation to, is eCall fitted on all new vehicles? Well,
I think so. If that was the context of your first slide, then yeah.
Okay, so eCall is a mandated European standard now, and even though we've had Brexit, we're still following that standard. So any new vehicle that's introduced in the market since 2018. So Ford bring out the new the super duper model. If it's a new model, it has to have eCall. So any vehicle sold in Europe needs to have eCall now. Now, obviously, vehicles. If you bought the 2015 Audi in 2019, that won't have it. If you've bought the new model of Audi that was introduced after 2018, it will.
I think a follow-up question from John, if you can just bear with me. He's talking about two-wheelers, trucks, etc.
Currently not being installed. There is work being done in the heavy vehicle area, but it's currently not in the standard. So at the moment, it's cars and light goods vans.
Thank you. Are there any interoperability challenges, and what are the steps being taken to overcome them?
I think that's a very good and wide question. So in terms of eCall itself, it is a standard. So whoever builds eCall, whichever vehicle, it's all built to a standard. It has to have the MSD in that format. The telephone call has to work in that way. So it's all interoperable once it gets the 999 or the TPS. The problem then is the interoperability from that point onwards. What happens after that? Because when you're talking to the police, you've got, what, 43 police services, you've got an equal number of fire, you've got quite a number of ambulances, all with different systems, all with different ways of interfacing with each other. And that is a real issue. So we might work with Surrey Fire and provide them the feed of equal data, but Leicestershire, Warwickshire may have different feeds. So obviously, there are standards around incident exchange that could be used, such as MATE or DATEX2. They would be good basis for interoperability in the future, and we would sort of encourage people to use those standards.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Thomas is asking, firstly, are there major general differences in response times and usage in Europe? And secondly, is the eCall standard being adopted at all outside of Europe?
Yeah, so let me just answer the second question first, because that's the easiest one. Yes, it is. It's in Australia. China has a version of it. I think they have a version of everything. America has OnStar. Now, whether it's completely compliant with eCall, I can't answer. I can get you an answer on that. But yes, we have pretty much identical around the world. Now, can you just remind me of the first?
Yes, the first question from Thomas was, are there major general differences in response time and usage in Europe?
Response times, it would be hard to answer, but without actually sort of going and measuring them. But if you remember that PSAP concept, that when you press 999, it goes to a PSAP. Now, in the UK, we have one PSAP. It's the BT 999 service. There are 6 different call centres, but it's one telephone line. Now, in France, they have loads of different PSAPs. And part of the SHADAR work that we did, and we'll send a link out to this research paper. So we did a survey about the European implementation of this. Now, each country has implemented it in different ways. Some might have one PSAP who passes it to another PSAP. Some might have a single PSAP. So the actual architecture of the call handling differs from country to country. And although we don't have specific response times in that, that would certainly influence it, because the more legs in the journey you've got, the longer it's going to take.
Mark would like to know, or I think this is more of a comment actually. Mark says, on a recent first aid training, I was advised it was a good idea to always ask for fire rather than police because they are better prepared to manage difficult accident logistics. Police can send initial responses, but then have to start coordinating. I guess this supports your data argument.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, go on. You can
absolutely, Mark. I mean, can you imagine that? You know, the first thing 999 will say to you is, what service do you require? And you say, well, I don't know. I think I might need a lift, or what do you think? This sort of vehicle, it's crazy. You're in an accident. How are you really going to know? So it may well be that fire is the best thing. And this, absolutely, Mark, you know, if you just sent the data saying this vehicle has had an airbag collision, you send that to fire, straight away they're notified of it. They can start to prepare. So yeah, if you use the data, you can notify people and just avoid all of that, passing it down the line, tell everybody first time, and they'll be a lot better prepared for it.
Just in relation to your previous answer about European differentials, Thomas says, thank you, the best overview I have seen on eCall so far.
Thank you.
This next person, not quite sure how you pronounce this name, GBKLS. I'll have to work on my pronunciation
I know that,
skills.
that's George. That's George.
Oh, is that George? Okay,
Yeah.
My apologies, George. Have you had a chance to see some of the live data from eCall to understand the quality of the location data?
Yes, so one of the slides I skipped over is we're currently doing a project for Department of Transport under the TRIG initiative. And in fact, the announcement was made 2 days ago, so I can now officially talk about it. We are talking with some of the 999 responders, and we're seeing actually some of the eCall data that is coming through into that ESEC database. Now, it's hard for us to actually then take that and go and validate it against the location, because obviously the incident's actually cleared. I do actually have an eCall test box, which IMR kindly have loaned to us permanently, and I have been driving around with that and pressing it. Now, one of the interesting things that we're finding is that I've been looking at the point where I press it to the point where the eCall unit actually gathers the location. Now, it seems along the road there is a delay between pressing it and it then deciding to activate. And George, I've had to guess maybe 100 meters, but in terms of the lateral position across the road, so if I press it in lane 3, or rather should I say my daughter presses it whilst I'm driving, if I'm in lane 3, it does seem to indicate lane 3. The research we've got is that eCall data does seem to be lane accurate. I wouldn't like to hang my hat on it right now, but it does seem to be pretty accurate, given good satellite coverage, obviously.
We're out of time, I'm afraid, Alan, but thank you very much for such a fascinating tech talk today. I should say, if you're watching live, that the recording of today's AESIN Tech Talk will be available on the usual AESIN platforms, on the Basecamp members-only platform, and of course the AESIN website as well. Looking ahead, your usual host Gunny will return on Thursday, the 6th of July at noon. We'll have Janos Opperman, who is co-founder of Clipper Automotive, and the theme for the next Tech Talk will be developing an EV kit that works and is road legal on a budget. So I hope that you can join us for that one. Again, it's going to be on Thursday, the 6th of July at noon, and that's Janos Opperman, who's going to be our special guest. Please spread the word to all of your friends. In the meantime, thank you very much, Alan, and we'll see you again for next month's Tech Talk.
Thanks very much, everyone.